Hello everybody, today I'm making another Christmas card, and today I chose some white cardstock as my base and this lovely colored pattern paper that I'm just cutting to the right size to cover the whole front of the card. Using my grid on the craft mat, I cut down the pattern paper to the right size, and I do that by the help of my trusted X-Acto knife. Since this is a rather thin paper, I only have to go once with my knife and it is separated easily. So you see here, this is a lovely cream colored pattern paper that shows some snowflakes and colored dots in 2 shades of cream, and I really like that. So with my tape adhesive I am going over the back side of the paper and then I just glue it down onto my white card base. This will be a very clean looking card. There will not be so much on it. That's why I chose the pattern paper to cover the whole card base. So the next step for me is to cut down some more white cardstock to fit on the card, but have 1/2 centimeter space on the right and left side to see the pattern paper on the background. Again, I'm using my X-Acto knife and my ruler, cutting the paper to the right size. And again, while I do that, I want to let you know that all of the supplies that I use are in the description box below, as well as on my blog, together with some high-resolution photos of the end product. So hop on over, check it out. Well, the grid on my craft mat comes in handy when I'm too lazy to measure the length of the card, so I just line the card up and cut the cardstock. So on that white cardstock I want to have some text, kind of like a background text, and I'm using this silicone stamp here on my acrylic block, and I'm also using some scrap paper as a cover for my craft mat because I don't want it to be dirty. And also I want to make like a test print of my stamp. I'm using chalk ink in this lovely olivey green, covering the whole stamp with that ink. I'm using, again, a scrap paper, printing it once, only covering it lightly again, and then printing the text onto my cardstock. You see that the text didn't come through everywhere, and that's fine with me because it actually helps the look of a background text even more. I clean up my stamp to keep it in the best shape I can have it in for the future. And while I let that particular piece of cardstock dry, I am moving on, trying to find out how I want to put my sentiment down there and this lovely star. So I will cut down another piece of cardstock in the size of that star. I have to make sure that I can cover the whole width of it. Just cutting that one piece. And then I will check if it fits on my card base. There's actually a bit more that I have to cut, because still it was a bit too wide, and I also have to correct the line, make it all straight and good looking. Using the card base as a guideline again makes me not having to measure every time. And for lazy bones like I am, sometimes this is a nice shortcut. Again, with the stamp, I want to go for gold. I know that for the star, I want it to be shiny and gold, so I will use some golden ink. And since this is the first time I try that stamp, again, I just press it down on the scrap paper there to see how it comes out and where I want to put it and how I want to position everything. And first I was going for a white cardstock behind the star, but you see here that I decided to cover up the whole cardstock with the same olive ink that I used for the background text. And that is because the card would have looked flat otherwise. At least to me, there would not have been this, well, interest in the card, would just have been too flat. So again, I'm stamping the star on white cardstock because I was actually going to cut it out and glue it upon this green panel. But I decided otherwise later on, while I figure out which sentiment I'm going to use from my stamp set. In my head, I'm also deciding that I want to put the star onto the green cardstock directly. So I went for an English sentiment today. It says Merry Christmas. And it has quite the romantic font, which I think works perfectly with this kind of background text that is already on the card. Would I have used a modern text, I think it would just have looked weird. So I chose the very dark sap green for my sentiment, and I'm just inking up my stamp. Again, trying the stamp first on some scrap paper, and I'm happy with the outcome. And now I'm going to stamp the sentiment onto the olivey green panel, inking up the stamp nicely, and then with the help of the grids on my mat and also the acrylic block, I'm lining everything up straight before I press down the silicone stamp. What I like about that chalk ink, it doesn't run. It has a very smooth, very, well, chalky finish, and it doesn't run on the cardboard, and I like that a lot. Now that I've got my sentiment down and stored away, I ink up that star again with my golden ink, and I'm going to press it down onto the olive green panel directly, making sure that the print came through as good as it might. I know that you can't really see it right now, but I will go over it with a glitter pen in a couple of minutes, and then the star will be shiny and standing out. So I let it dry for a bit because that golden ink takes a tiny bit longer to dry. And here I go with my golden glitter pen, just going all over the star. And I have a 0.1 millimeter tip here, so it's very fine. And I have no trouble going over the very thin lines of the stamped star there. And this pretty much makes the panel of my card. And once I have everything dried, I'm just going to glue it down with some adhesive tape glue. It takes a while and some patience to go all over the star with my glitter pen, but I promise it's worth the effort. And again, as always, the material that I use is in my blog as well as in the descriptions below. If you want to use exactly the same material that I use, just go check it out. I link to all of the products. But again, there are tons of other brands or materials that you could use to create something similar as I did with my card. So I'm just going to let this sit for maybe a minute or two to make sure that the glitter pen is also dried. And I decided to put down some of that packaging yarn. It's actually more like a twine. And I'm just cutting a piece of string here. And I'm trying to figure out how high my panel will be and where I want the yarn to sit. And on this white panel, I'm just putting down one strip of adhesive tape there just to make it easier for me to hold the string in place while I tie the bow. And I want to make sure that the paper doesn't curl when I pull on the strings to make a knot. I find that little tip very handy, and it saves a lot of frustration and time when you just add this little strip of adhesive tape there. So once my bow is tied, I'm cutting the tails, and then I am gluing down the same panel onto my card base. I'm using the same adhesive tape here. It's strong enough to hold the cardstock in place, which is a nice thing. Some tape runners are not strong enough to hold cardstock, but this one is working out nicely. I'm lining up my card on the grid again to make sure that I have this panel sitting right in the middle where I want it to be. And then I'm just using some paper towel to push everything down and make sure that I don't have my fingerprints all over the card and maybe smudge something. The same I do with the olive green panel, adding some adhesive tape and gluing it down where I want it to be, sitting on top of the string and covering it slightly at the edges of the card. So that summons up the card for today. I'm adding some super glue, just a tiny dot here to keep the bow in place and not have it wiggle around, but then that's that. I hope you liked today's video, got inspired to create your very own Christmas card. Have a very good day. I hope I see you tomorrow for a new video in this Advent calendar. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. I will be very happy to answer them. Goodbye.